What up, y'all? It is a real ball watcher, so make sure the binoculars is grabbed, you feel me? But we're going to do a quick eval this week. I know I did one at the end of last week. Hopefully, top of the week, this one do better. But Tez Johnson, Oregon. Let's get into it. Now, last year, y'all know I did a lot of wide receiver evals because we needed wide receivers. Needed them in the second round, so we had to kind of do some deep cuts, some deep dives into guys that weren't necessarily covered by the media. Probably going to have to do that this year also because the wide receiver class isn't that good. But ain't no need for me to keep complaining about, oh, Panthers need receivers, da-da-da-da. Let's just start, let's start evaluating them, see what we got out there to fish from. So, Tez Johnson, Oregon wide receiver. This is, I want to say his fifth year. He's a fifth-year senior. 5'10", 160, 165 pounds. He's listed at 165. Wouldn't be surprised if he's a little lower than that. But that's what he is. So let's get into the tape. Now, when it comes to the stuff that is Tez Johnson's game, I think the first thing you got to talk about is how much of a yak threat he is. My bad. I forgot to mention. I switched the swag up on y'all. But how much a yak threat he is. If you watched any Oregon games over the past 2 years, even with Troy Franklin, you realize, hey, this guy is nuts. Like, whenever he touched the balls, it's something electrifying is going to happen. Whether it's for 2-3 yards, 15 or 40. He just has this knack, this ability to make plays when the ball is in his hands. Now, while he is a much smaller frame, smaller weight receiver, not necessarily short, but smaller weight-wise, a slender guy, he is actually pretty decent at breaking tackles, spinning off of guys. He's a very slippery dude. He ducks under tackles. He does all of the extra stuff just to, make a defender miss or, keep plays going. I mean, even if he doesn't necessarily get a lot of yards after the catch, he's at least making one or two guys miss. I would love to see his PFF stats when it comes to broken tackles because it's crazy. But also, he's able to beat guys to tackling angles. He's fast enough to get around guys, get past guys. He has great start and stop ability. He's like a sports car. I mean, he can stop on a dime. He can go immediately 0 to 100. He has enough long speed to get out of there on guys and get long plays. He's just, I mean, if you're looking at somebody like Luther Burden, who's I feel like is a much more well put together receiver, better frame, better receiving chops, maybe. Even though this guy doesn't have bad receiving chops, we'll get to those later. I think this is the more dynamic version of that. But we'll get into his player comps and stuff like that. But I just had to mention, I mean, dog, you look at some of these plays, I mean, and the plays I have on tape isn't even the best examples of what I'm trying to allude. I mean, if you look at his highlights on YouTube or you just watch an Oregon game, you'll see that he has just plenty of plays where he's just making guys miss, where he's just getting yards, taking a bubble screen. That's what a lot of Oregon's offense is because of this guy also. Taking bubble screens, taking smoke screens, taking drags, and just going. Getting 10 yards out of it, 8 yards out of it, 20 yards out of it. Just off his merit alone. He'll have one blocker and he's able to beat 3 defenders and, get an extra 10 yards out of the catch. So really big yak threat. That's something we can use a lot in this offense. We don't have anybody that's necessarily a yak threat. For the past 2 years, basically Bryce Young has been throwing it, and wherever the ball is caught, that's where you spot the ball. It's not much yak. I mean, we have one big explosive play from just Javian Sanders this year. But outside of that, it's not much unless the guy is just wide open. So that's something that could really electrify this offense and add a lot of explosive plays, which we need. We need guys that can make plays, and this guy is a playmaker to say the least. Next thing I want to talk about, I already kind of mentioned a little bit, his speed and acceleration. I talked about how he has great start-stop speed. He can stop on a dime, go 0 to 100 in a second. He's a sports car, like I said, or a foreign, basically a Ferrari. But he has a lot of good speed deep. It's not just in the yak department, but it's also good enough speed to threaten deep. And we'll talk about another quality that he has that makes him a good deep threat, which is what we need. We need somebody that can stretch out the defense. There's a lot of plays on his tape where he's taken to a safety and a defender over top. He's a lot of Oregon's kind of deep concepts where they're throwing digs and comeback routes and things like that is because Tez Johnson, or Evan Stewart also, we'll get in his eval another day. But Tez Johnson mainly, especially last year with Troy Franklin, he's just taking the defenders deep. He stretched out the defense, so this leaves a big, wide open gap between the safety and the linebackers to throw a dig behind it. But then, if the linebackers drop too far, now you have Terrence Ferguson underneath, or one of your running backs underneath to just dump off to and tell them to go make a play. So that's a part of our offense that we really need. I mean, we need somebody that can stretch the field. Xavier Leggett was kind of supposed to be that guy. He hasn't really shown that he has that much. He's that much of a deep threat to where the entire defense is catering to him, where he's taking a safety and a corner on a post on a drag. And especially this guy, because Tez Johnson, because he plays from the slot. A lot of the times the safety has to run with him. A lot of the times the nickel has to run with him, or a linebacker has to run with him, and that opens up the middle of the field, something that Bryce Young is really good at. And also, he has the speed to run away from guys on horizontal routes, on crossers, on mainly on crossers. That's kind of the point that I want to get across, because we've seen Bryce Young, while he does struggle to hit the vertical on the outside the numbers, he is good up the seams, and he is really good on vertical routes, on crossers, posts, things like that. He's shown the ability to just run away from his defender. He doesn't necessarily need a screen or a pick or anything like that. He just has the speed and acceleration to get away from that guy. You put it on him, he has a step, and now you combine that with his yak ability, you got a big play waiting to happen. So, two things that we really need in this offense: yak ability and speed, or a deep threat, I should say, would be solved, or at least, I don't want to say solved because he's one player, but honestly, would be solved with this pick, especially if it hits. Next thing I want to talk about is his route running, or mainly his stems and releases. He doesn't have necessarily the nuanced route running where he's using the 3-step method or a whole bunch of diamond releases and things like that, like Cooper Kupp, Ladd McConkey, guys like that. He has much more of the, I wasn't making videos back then, but when Zay Flowers was coming out, I was talking about a lot how he's so good at route running because he's so explosive. He has such good acceleration. That's the same thing with here. He's able to just drop his hits and burst out of something. He's able to just excel out of a break immediately, or stop on a dime when guys are threatened with his speed. And that opens up a lot of his routes to get a lot of separation off of. But what I'm not mentioning also is, this is why I put his stems and releases mainly, because how much of a yak threat he is. I talk about how elusive, I didn't necessarily use the word, but how elusive he is. Think about how I talked about Berkey Irvin last year in this video, where he's so elusive and he's able to set guys up to make guys miss. It's the same thing whenever he's playing wide receiver. Because he's playing from the slot, a lot of the times he has a 3-way go. Or even if he's playing on the outside, he has a 2-way go. He can either break it inside or go up deep. And he just uses those quick juke moves. He's, squares the defender up, uses a move, and then gets out of there because he has such good acceleration to just burst out of that play. A lot of guys you see with double moves, they make a double move, the defender bites, but then it takes them a minute to get upfield. I mean, we've seen it on that Xavier Leggett play against the Saints, where he made a move, he was able to get that DB to bite, but it took him a minute to get upfield. So even when Bryce threw it, he only had like half a step, and then he got the ball ripped away and was interception. That's not going to be the issue with Tez Johnson, because he's so good with his acceleration. He's so good at squaring guys up and making guys miss with the ball in his hands or without it, that a lot of his stems at the top of his route, because once again, he's mostly playing from the slot, guys have to play off. You don't want to press from the slot and he beats you at the line and he's gone. You don't, and then most of the time you're playing from the slot, you're facing linebackers, you're facing safeties, you're facing nickels, who are playing at least 5 yards off anyway. So if he's able to get a 5-yard head start, and now you're like, dang, this dude is coming at me fast, he's squaring my shoulders up, I don't know which way he's going to go, and he just makes a move, you guess wrong, and he accelerates out of that, you're cooked, you're beat. And we could use that. I don't want to say it's instant separation, because it's not necessarily that. We could use that type of separation outside of Adam Thielen. We don't have many separators outside of Adam Thielen. Or I know some people on Twitter were talking about Xavier Leggett, but you can't be a reliable separator or a reliable deep threat if we can't rely on you to catch the ball. What's the point of getting open if the ball not going to be completed? So we need somebody that can be a reliable separator and a reliable deep threat with good route running, and Tez Johnson is one of those guys. Hopefully I'm not being too long-winded, but let's get into the next one. Where I want to go. Let's go here. He actually is, we talk about his slender frame, and we talk about how small he is, and we'll get into the negatives with that stuff later on into the video, but he has shown a good ability to catch the ball in traffic when I'm watching his tape. I mean, he's not a jump ball receiver. I wouldn't like say, hey, if he's in one-on-one coverage, he has a step on the guy, go throw it up, he's going to go and get it. He's not that guy. And I don't think anybody expected him to be that guy. But he has shown on tape where he's running these crossers and or a slant, and there's a guy on his back. He's able to reel the ball in with both hands, keep it to his body, and come down with a tough catch. He's able to go downfield and make contested catches. In that Ohio State game, I know he had that big bomb play, but I mean, it was a guy on his back. We've seen David Moore where there's a guy on his back and he doesn't even make contact. Like David Moore, he has the ball in his hands and the guy made contact, he drops it. He made a pretty good catch against Denzel Burke where he's on his back, he's tackling him when he catches the ball, and he's still able to hold on to it for a touchdown. I think it was a slot fade on here I have where he was able to go up and go get it over the defender. Now, like I said, that's not what you want him to do. You don't want Dave Canales running slot fades or fades on the goal line like we were at the start of this year with Tez Johnson. That's not what you want. But it is something nice to have a guy that is reliable to make a play for you in those. Let's say if that Xavier Leggett play that he made that drop on that Eagles game, if that's Tez Johnson, I think he makes that catch 10 times out of 10. 9 times out of 10. That's just how good. And that wasn't even a catch in traffic, but that's a tougher catch, which we'll get into later, that he would be able to make. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and get it to the point now. He has a decent catch radius. There's plenty of one-handed catches, and he has good hands too. He has one-handed catches on his tape. He has catches where he's going up over linebacker when the ball is layered in a crossing route that we've seen up here. Stop, Mooney. My dog's trying to eat something on the ground. But yeah, I mean, he has plenty of those good catch radius catches on his tape. So to my point, that Xavier Leggett throw at the end of that Eagles game, I have no doubt that Tez Johnson catches that 10 times out of 10, maybe 9.5 times out of 10. That's just how good he is with his catch radius. And he's good enough with his catch in traffic to make those plays. So that's all I really got for the catch in traffic and stuff. But like I said, good catch radius. He's able to go outside his frame. He's able to catch it with the guy on him. He's able to catch it through contact. Maybe not necessarily getting like blown up like Xavier Leggett did in that Eagles game by Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I wouldn't trust him to do that. But, if you throw a little errant pass, he has to go up and go get it. He can go do that because he has good athleticism and good hands to go do that. One-handed catches, things like that. Last thing I want to talk about, he provides a spark in the return game. We haven't had a good returner. Well, last year ISM was a pretty good returner, but he got cut, didn't make the roster. But he has return chops on his tape. I mean, he's one of the best returners in college football because he's so electric, because he's able to make guys miss. He had a punt in that Boise game. He didn't make much of a noise in that game when it comes to receiving. I think he had 3 catches for like -2 yards because they were both screens. Like I said, a lot of that offensive screens, even though he can do a lot more than that. But he did have a punt return for a touchdown that kind of helped them win that game because they only won by 3. So providing that spark in the return game also is good, really good value. Where if you're like, hey, maybe we shouldn't get this guy because he's only a slot guy. He's very slender. I don't know how much we can rely on him to be a true receiver and much more of a gadget guy. Also putting in that maybe he could be one of the best punt returners in the league, especially with the way that the kick return is set up now. If he can be one of those guys, that provides immense value to his draft stock. So I don't know exactly where he will go because of his frame, his size, things like that. I know once he runs the 40, he gets in that 4.3, 4.2. Probably going to be 4.3, but that 4.3 range, should boost his stock. And this playoff run probably will boost his stock also. I mean, y'all see what he did in the Big Ten championship game. But I don't know exactly where he go, but we'll have to see once this draft process is over. But let's get into the stuff that's not necessarily his game. Now, when it comes to the stuff that's not necessarily Tez's game, I think the first thing you gotta talk about is his frame and size. Now, he's not going to be able to play on the outside most of the time. I mean, if you're able to get him a free release on the outside, like kind of how the Rams use Tutu Atwell, just giving away spoilers, the way that kind of the Dolphins use Tyreek Hill on those orbit motions, things like that, yes, you can use him outside because then he doesn't have to get worried about getting pressed. But if you want to line him up at Z, especially not at no X, if you want to line up at Z and a guy is able to press him off the line, now it is risky because he has the speed and the agility to make a guy miss and just go and make a play. But there's plenty of tape, times on tape where a guy's able to get his hands on him, even when it's not necessarily pressed. He's able to bump him within the route and zone or something like that. He completely throws him off his route, takes him out of the play. So the frame that he has, the size that he has, it limits him to most likely being a slot receiver that you can flex out here and there. And I know somebody like Devontae Smith is often brought up for one of the smaller guys that necessarily are slender guys that work out on the outside. You could tell he was much more physical and much stronger play strength wise playing on the outside. I don't think this guy has the play strength play on the outside. Like I said, even in the slot, he's getting jammed and knocked off of his route a little bit too often. Even though a lot of times he's making guys miss because he's able to set them up with those stems and that acceleration and speed we talked about, but not going to work in the NFL with guys that are much faster, more accurate with their hands, things like that. Next thing I want to talk about is focus drops a little bit. I know I talked about, he has good hands, he has good catch radius. That's why I can say that they are focus drops. I think a lot of his drops are, since he's getting short passes, since he's getting a drag, since he's getting a flat route or a smoke screen, he kind of is looking to see what he's going to do or how he's going to set the defender up to miss before he reels it in, and it causes a drop. I wasn't even going to put drops on here at first, but in the 3 games, or not 3 games, in like the 5-6 games that I watched, I'm a Oregon fan, so I see him 24/7. But in the 5-6 games that I watched on actual tape, I think it was like 3 or 4 drops. So I was like, you know what, that's notable enough to put it on here. So I went ahead and added the focus drops up there. Next thing I want to talk about, he's going to be, it's almost like he's a gadget guy. I mentioned this in his strengths because he primarily plays for the slot. And a lot of times you want to manufacture him touches so he can just kind of get in space and go. You don't necessarily have to use him like that. But think of how I think Curtis Samuel was, which is a really good comp. I should have thought about that. Think about how Curtis Samuel was used in Carolina, where he's getting a lot of end arounds, a lot of jet sweeps. He was still getting slants and actual post and goals and things like that. Not as much as you want, because I think Curtis Samuel could have been a really good Z receiver if they actually used him that way. But neither here nor there. How high do you want to draft the gadget guy? You know, I think Curtis Samuel went in the 2nd or 3rd. He had a much better frame, much better build. So this guy could fall because, 1, he's a gadget guy. 2, because of the frame that he has. Kind of, you seen how Tank Dell fell to the 4th round. I was really high on Tank Dell coming out. Tank Dell was, as you see, worked out as a Z receiver on the outside. And, you know, flexing in and out from the slot. But you've seen it a lot more on his tape that he was able to do that. He was able to beat press with his releases. He has much better release package than somebody like Tez Johnson does. Not saying he can't develop it, because we've seen with the stems that he has and the elusivity that he has, he might be able to add it to his game. But it's not there right now, so I can't project him to work on the outside like I did for Tank Dell. Or even Zay Flowers doesn't play on the outside a lot, or even somebody like Zay Flowers. Last thing I want to talk about when it comes to stuff that's not necessarily his game, injury concern. Last year, if I did this video last year, or if I did this video earlier in the year, which, no, this is why I'm doing these evals so much later, because somebody like Troy Franklin, I was really high on, y'all know, last year. As the year got on, if I continue to watch the tape and do his eval later, I'd have been much lower, because you've seen a lot more drops. You've seen his hands weren't as strong. He wasn't as good of a contested catcher as he was the year before. He wasn't providing as much yak as he was the year before, especially next to somebody like Tez Johnson. You can see like, oh, this dude necessarily doesn't have the same chops. So that was just on me putting it a little bit too early. I still believe in Troy Franklin, still believe he could be a good player. But y'all seen, I think in the wide receiver evals, the wide receiver rankings last year, I dropped him a little bit. But kudos for me for waiting, because you got to worry about the injury concern. I mean, Tez Johnson got tackled this year and broke his collarbone. So you see something with his frame and size already popped up in college. Guys are much bigger, more athletic, hitting harder, you know, dropping their weight on you a lot more. I know a lot of people talk about that with Bryce Young coming out. So we're like, I'm not trying to hear it. Bryce Young wasn't 160. You know, at least Bryce Young was 190, 185, probably at 195 right now. That's 30 more pounds than this guy got. So you do have to worry about his injury risk when it comes to his frame and stuff like that in the next level. But I mean, all of that stuff can drop him pretty low on board. So you might be able to get a steal if he does work out. If he is a Tank Dell, he might be the Tank Dell of this class. He might be a guy you get in the 4th, 5th round, because guys are worried about his frame and his size and him maybe not working out on the outside, only being a gadget guy and being afraid of injuries. And then you get a guy that, you know, turns into a really, really good player year 1 and gets you 700, 800 yards, something like that, 4 or 5 touchdowns, and then a really good returner. So that's all I got for stuff that's not necessarily his game. Now, I know this is a little bit of deja vu. I get it. But when it comes to his Tez Johnson's player build or his player makeup, I am going to say once again, just like I did last year for Bucky Irvin, he's a stick of dynamite. Like, you just give him the ball, whether it's a slot smoke screen or a slot bubble or an in and around or a jet sweep, punt return. You give him the ball, put the ball in his hands, he's going to make a play. And it's going to be an electric play. It's going to be an explosive play. A lot of guys talked about Bucky Irvin's size last year when I was one of the only people really high on him at running back. They talk about he's too small. He's not going to hold up at the next level. He doesn't generate enough power and force through for the frame that he has. And now he's probably the best rookie running back this year. Now, he was running back 3 on my board behind Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks. But he's been better than Trey Benson, even though he has a lot more opportunity. Jonathan Brooks hasn't played. When he's played, he's looked good. I'll say that. He looked good. Just as good as Bucky, might I add. But he got hurt. So he's obviously been the best rookie running back. Same thing with Tez Johnson. I think this is just going to be a stick of dynamite. I think you put him in the slot. You ask him to run goals. You ask him to run slot fades. You ask him to run corners from the slot, posts from the slot, crossing routes. Use him on those orbit and motion screens. Not screens, but motions pre-snap to get him to run outside routes, things like that. Use him in stacks to hide him from getting, pressed on the release. And you might have something here. As long as his body holds up. Maybe you could add another 10, 15 pounds, get him up to 180, around there, 175, 180. So he's a little bit more, can take a little bit more damage. And you might have something in year 1. So I love Tez Johnson coming out, but let's get into his player comps. The first guy I'm going to actually say is Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is also a really, really small, slender guy. I think he's much taller than Zay Flowers. I think Zay Flowers is 5'9". Zay Flowers is like 5'9". I think he's up to like 190 now, 185. But both of these guys were super slender frame guys coming out. Both of these guys kind of use the same ways to win. They win from the slot, getting screens, giving smoke screens, bubble routes, things like that. They also can win on crossing routes. They also can win on slants, on digs. They can even win on goal balls on the outside. So I think he could be kind of like a B grade Zay Flowers. I don't know if he has the same frame, size, and makeup to last at the next level like Zay Flowers has. But you've seen what Zay Flowers is. I wouldn't say that Zay Flowers is necessarily a wide receiver 1, but he's in that Debo role where he's maybe not a wide receiver 1, but he's like an elite weapon for your offense or a great weapon for your offense. I think that fits very, very well with Tez Johnson. Next is, I'll actually say this. Next is Xavier Worthy. I think he has that. I don't necessarily think he has that same type of speed, but he has plenty of speed enough to where the way that the Chiefs use Xavier Worthy, he could be that same thing. I want to say Xavier Worthy. Let me look up his stats. I think he has like around 400 yards this year. Yeah, Xavier Worthy is at 448 yards this year and 4 touchdowns, not even counting his rushing stats. And Patrick Mahomes has missed him a lot, so he could be a 607-yard receiver. I think using him in an offense like that, where you're using him on post, goals, crossing routes, in and around, still they're using him on screens also, comeback routes that you can use his speed on, and the way that they get him to get free releases. I think it could work at the next level, being that Xavier Worthy type of guy. But yeah, I mean, we kind of know about Xavier Worthy. We all watching his rookie year. He's been a pretty decent rookie. Next thing I want to talk about, or next comparison I want to say, are shades of, I think, Tutu Atwell. Now, Tutu Atwell, it took him a minute to come along. But this is another guy that, wow, coming out, he was really, really small. I think he was around the same size. Yeah, right now he's 5'9", 165. That's what he's listed at right now. So he's still the same size Tez Johnson is. But Tutu Atwell, he has 507 receiving yards this year. Last year he had 483, so basically a 500-yard receiver. Season isn't over this year. He can get to 600 yards. His rookie year, necessarily didn't play his rookie year, but his second year, which was basically his rookie year, he had 300 yards. So it took him a minute to come along, and I think that could be the same thing for Tez Johnson if it doesn't work out with his frame and size. Might take him a minute to come along, but you get him in the right OC with the right OC and the right system, he could have a 500, 600-yard. He could be your 600-yard receiver. That's a great wide receiver 3 and a great explosive threat for your offense at that size. So it's not the same days. It's not the same day and age back in the day where guys had to be 6'3", 6'1", 200 pounds, 215, 20 pounds. I think getting a guy that's 5'9", 160, get him up to 175 maybe, and with this skill set, I think it can still work. We see it with Xavier. I mean, I think even Xavier Worthy, I think he's around the same size also. Yeah, Xavier Worthy's 5'11", 165. So you've seen guys with this same exact body build be able to work out at the next level. So I'm not as worried for Tez Johnson for it to work out. I'm not sure why he doesn't have the pedigree other than the injury, that he suffered this year. But I feel like he should be talked a lot more. I think he is going to be in my top 10 receivers, and kind of a little bit high on my top 10 receivers because it's not that good of a class as it was last year. But yeah, I like Tez Johnson. So that's all I got for y'all. If you like the video, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what other evals you want to see. Drop the players you want to see below. What do you think of Tez Johnson? Do you think he could fix a lot of the problems with the Carolina offense? Do you think he'd be a good weapon for Bryce Young? Let me know what it is. I'll see y'all next week.